Do you love the Tabernacle Choir? This year, the choir's music is everywhere you are. Listen to your favorite choir songs and music and the spoken word anytime you want on Alexa by simply enabling the skill.
Alexa, play music in the spoken word.
Now playing music in the spoken word.
You can also download the Tabernacle Choir app, subscribe to the choir on YouTube, listen on Spotify, and have access to all their wonderful music. Happy listening.
Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome in on a Wednesday morning. Cougar football is going to get going today. Their first practice. PK and I will be headed down there. Jake Hatch will be headed down there. There'll be tons of media there. Everybody's ramping up. Everyone's getting going. The coaches poll is out. Got a question up on our Facebook page. BYU and Utah. Cougars ranked 15th. Utes ranked 21st. In the coaches poll. Is that too high, too low, just about right? And I think Brian nails it. He posted, who knows, it's all a guessing game. Give fans and media something to talk about. True story. I believe that. It is indeed a guessing game. You can ballpark it, and every year people try to, and get a few teams right, get a few teams wrong. There's always a few teams that are way too high. There's always somebody who's unranked who ends up in the top 10. There's usually somebody in the top 10 who just completely tanks. And some of that can be injury driven, and some of it is you just miss. They're just not right. But, I wouldn't want it any other way. Do I want people to start doing the polls? No. When a conference has stopped doing the polls on the media day, I hate it. I'd rather have them take a shot and have something to try to, figure out and see, that's that makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me, whatever. Give it a run. Why not? I went back and looked at where Indiana and Miami were ranked last year in the preseason. In the coaches poll, Indiana was 19. In the media poll, they were 20, and they go undefeated. Miami was 10th in both, which it's not bad. I mean, you thought they were going to be pretty good, your top 10, but they end up in the final. And Penn State was second in one poll and third in another, and they had a 3-game losing streak, and out goes the coach and start over. So there you go. I mean, it's just, all over the place. BYU last year was 23 in the coaches poll. And they were not in the AP Top 25. And Texas Tech was 23 in the media poll and 24 in the coaches poll. So you can see they hit on some teams, they missed on some teams. Tech was way too low. The Cougars were too low. Indiana just way too low. But what the heck? I don't want to stop doing preseason polls just because you can't hit it on the button. It's no one person. I mean, they're turning loose tons of voters here. I think 67 coaches voted in the preseason poll last year. So, or assigned their chief of staff to do it, or a sports information director to do it, or a graduate assistant, somebody. What are you going to do, right? They do the best they can, and there it is. So, all right. So that's obviously one of the stories right there. One of the other stories of the day is that Skubal makes his debut for the Dodgers, and they get beat 5-1 by the Cubs, and they've dropped 5 in a row. Now, they are playing some stiff competition, the Red Sox and Cubs. Both had hot streaks and cold streaks this year. The Red Sox currently on fire. The Cubs were hot, then they were ice cold, then they were hot again. But on the end, they're facing playoff teams. These are the teams that are facing the playoffs, and, best 3 out of 5, best 4 out of 7. You get swept into 3-game series like with the Red Sox. They've lost a couple games here to the Cubs. I mean, it can go wrong very quickly. I saw some hilarious stuff on social media. Shouldn't the Dodgers win a game in the regular season before we crown them because they've dropped 5 in a row now? We were talking about this earlier. I think the Dodgers are great. Talking point for the owners as they press for a salary cap, but I don't think it's about competition. I think this is about the owners looking at the franchise, the value of the franchises in the NBA and the NFL go through the roof. Baseball's climbing, but it's not exploding. And what's the difference? They don't have a cap on it, on the major expense of their players. And that's it. So I think that the owners are going to dig in. There's so much money, $500 million, $1 billion, $1.5 billion at stake as valuations on these teams grow. I think they can stomach pain. They lose $50 million, they lose $100 million. It's easier to do if you think you're going to get $1 billion down the road. It's a lot easier to do. And I know they'll say they have to sell their teams to get it back, but they don't. They can borrow against that. So they can still get access to the money. You don't pay taxes on the loan. So in ways, that's actually even more appealing, I think. So I think the owners are going to dig in here and get something. I don't know if they'll call it a salary cap. In the NBA, they call it the second apron, but it acts like a hard cap. They'll get something that acts like a hard cap, whatever it's called. And maybe it'll just be called a cap. But I don't think they care about the language. I think they care about a cap on their expenses. So, all right, DJ and PK. The other story of the day would be Real Salt Lake against Tigres last night. We'll hear from Pablo Mastroeni. We'll get to that next. Stay with us right here on The Zone. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Well, Real Salt Lake loses to Tigres last night. It ends 1-1, so they both get a point. But in this format, no overtime, straight to penalties. And whoever wins penalties gets a second point. And everybody made their penalties for 5 rounds. It went to sudden death. And then Zach Booth hit the post. He missed. Tigres scored. They win 6-5 on penalties. They take 2 points. RSL takes 1. That's significant because you play 3 points. Or you play 3 games, and last year, for the MLS teams, the top 4 teams advanced, you had to get to 7 points and win a tiebreaker. Some of the teams on 7 points advanced, some did not. At this point, RSL only has 1 point, and a lot of teams won their opening game are on 3. So they could advance mathematically, but it seems like a long shot right now. So that was a big loss as far as advancing in League's Cup. The big story, though, was that Xavier Gozo, their star teenager from Utah County, did not play. And there were reports yesterday about him moving to Crystal Palace for £11 million, $14 to $15 million. And reports are it was close. And when you see those reports, like, well, if it's really getting close, they've got to. They can't play him. And he'd been in what was projected as the starting lineup the day before, and sure enough, when the lineups came out, he was out. Not just out of the starting lineup, but not even in the 20. So I think it is so close they don't dare risk an injury. So it's not done until it's done, but it's almost done. So then they go out and end up losing the game. Here's Pablo Mastroeni afterwards.
Yesterday you talked about the next step after St. Louis being what happens immediately after you win the ball. And that Pablo goal actually seemed like that on the offensive side, right? Morgan holds it up, Ruiz steps into it, and then one pass and a goal. Did you see more progress in that one than in that one play tonight? Did you see what you were looking for?
Yeah, no, I think the guys really executed, and we talked about in transition when we are in a low block, how do we get out? And I thought the guys did really well in that phase. And you know what I also want to see from the St. Louis game, and again, is to be more ourselves and control the game with the ball. And I think the guys did a really good job of that. Again, if you're going to beat these Mexican teams, it's not without the ball. It's going to be with the ball. They got such prolific strikers and attacking players. But if you make them defend, like all teams, at some point, it's going to crack. And, I thought in the second half we created probably 3 or 4 wonderful opportunities. Any other night, we score a second goal. So just thinking about the performance, thinking about because at the end of the day, the result is what it is. But how did we try to affect it? And a lot of positive things coming from obviously a tough road swing.
Okay, and then last year it took 7 points to advance. Knowing that you only got the one tonight, does that change how aggressive you have to be in the next match, or is it still mentality is to win or a good performance and let math take care of itself? Yeah,
again, I think, listen, we set out to win every game, especially here at home, and I think it's really with the posture. When you play away games, it's a little different. I think tonight we controlled a lot of the game, particularly in the second half, and again, it created really good opportunities. And 1v1 with the goalkeepers. Zach Booth had a couple, Diego had one, Morgan had a couple. And on any given night, those go in, and we're celebrating a victory. And so my whole thing is like, what can you control? The result you can't, but those moments we could do better with. And so for me, it's again the same mindset. I think in every one of these games, you're up against a top team, and you've got to be able to be elite in all phases of the game. And I thought the only part just lacking tonight was in front of goal, and that's always going to be the most difficult thing. But we got in great spots, some great actions, And I think a little unfortunate not to get a second goal tonight.
And then last one for me, and I hate to just ask about one player, but if I don't ask, someone else will. We haven't had a chance to see Pablo Ruiz in a while. What did you see from him besides the goal?
I'm so happy for Pablo Ruiz. He's been waiting for his opportunity and has been training extremely well. Had a conversation with him before we went to St. Louis, and he was left off the roster because we needed some more attacking players, being that Morgan and Gozo weren't available for that game. And those are always very difficult conversations. And I said, the only way you're going to get an opportunity is to keep doing what you're currently doing. And when that opportunity comes, you got to grab it. And tonight he grabbed it with both hands. And just, I think there's so many amazing stories in sport. And if there's one player that's had to overcome a ton of adversity in his career, it's Pablo Ruiz. And I'm his biggest fan. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about how far he's come, the way he was communicating out in the field, the way he played on both sides of the ball was just so top. And I think it comes in at a really important time with Griffin Dillon having surgery tomorrow. We needed to see a performance like that from Pablo, and we got it.
Thanks, Coach.
Yep.
Just to stay on that topic for a second, when you hurt a knee, there's a natural thought, to try and protect it. And aside from the goal, there was a 50-50 ball he won, I think, in the second half. It was kind of looping in the air, and another player stepped. Do you feel like that's the kind of challenge he threw himself into, which you won, which if you're protecting your knee, you don't step into that challenge?
Right. No, that's a great point. We've talked about this, and the psychological trauma that exists for players that have not just one major knee injury, but two, is something that I'm fortunate enough to not have experienced, but I know it's real. And I think this is the Pablo we saw tonight was the player that was, for me, the best midfielder in Major League Soccer in 2023. So to add another quality player in this transfer window, finally, and to see him play uninhibited, like you're saying, like going into tackles, not thinking. And oftentimes that comes because he hasn't been given an opportunity, right? And a lot of that's on me. But again, my takeaway from this game, as far as individuals, is Pablo's back. He's playing great. Scored a goal on top of it. Without his goal, we don't get the result. And so everything that he did tonight was class, and a lot of it comes from the understanding the moment and the gravity of the moment. And again, I just couldn't be prouder for Pablo because he is a top player.
You talked about the attack looking good and opportunities being created. It looked like Saba was creating chances, but it also looked like there were moments he wanted to go forward, be aggressive, play a ball in behind, and his teammates didn't read it the same way. Mm-hmm. How long did it take to get everybody on the same page with a new player who maybe thinks differently than some of his teammates? Yeah,
one of the things we talked at halftime was making sure that we keep threatening their back line. And if we keep threatening their back line, there's going to be gaps that open up underneath. I think we did a better job of that. He got on the end of a couple where he whipped one in. And the defender beat Vic to the ball in front of goal. So like those kind of opportunities, even though they don't show up on the score sheet, are critical for our attack, is to get numbers in the box and again, getting runners behind the defense to play those balls. As far as I think it just takes time. Again, Sava's been here for a few weeks now. I think with every performance, he continues to improve. He's a real shifty player, and a lot of things he does is kind of off the cuff. He likes going at players, and, the goal he set up in St. Louis is completely off the cuff. And so it takes a little bit of time to understand. Morgan's really predictable with his passes, even though they're, because he's been around for so long, players know when Morgan's going to pass the ball. And so I think just a little bit of timing, but that will come with time. And I think he's made enormous progress with our group and understanding a new position since he's been here.
With Gozo not in the 20 now, 2 games in a row, the attack is going to look different. Mm-hmm. Do you think guys are doing a good job of solving that? Because it's not just his goals and his assists, but the way he opens space for everybody else. It looks like it changes everything.
Yeah, no, obviously. I mean, Gozo has been, he's created a ton of our opportunities. not only for the team, but for himself. He scored a handful of goals, set up more than a handful of goals. But what I will say is in the last 2 games, Zach Booth has done some great things. And tonight, I think he had 2, maybe 3 really good opportunities in front of goal. And so I think he's got the ability to take players off the dribble. He's got a good eye for where to cross it, when to cross it. But he's also putting himself in those really dangerous spots as well. And so whilst the name might be different, I think what we're focusing on is how do we get the same type of output from positioning, from drive, from commitment, to make up for a player that's been so impactful in Gozo for us.
Do you think Luna and Saba could play well together, or are they too much alike and maybe not enough size? And, have you thought about that combination going forward?
Yeah, I think now, these last couple games has been, I think all these players can play with each other. I think our opponent has, depending on what type of game we're looking for, the reason why they complement each other is Sava's more of a stretch guy as well. He likes to dribble, but he can also stretch. And one of the things Sava brings is a lot of running, right? A lot of effort, a lot of running. And so I think, the way I look at the game, regardless of what formation you have, is on the front line, you have to have a minimum of 2 runners. And then there's 1 piano player, right? There's piano movers and piano players. But I think for the system to work and show its ideal self is you need 2 guys pushing the back line and you need 1 player underneath. And so, again, I think it will come with time. I think all our 10s can play with each other. I think what they are is really smart players and understanding, well, if this guy's coming underneath, I need to stretch to create space for him. So,
last thing for me, can you analyze, Aris, what you thought of him since he got to play in the middle of the back 3, him individually, and what you thought of the back 3 as a group?
Yeah. I think he struggled a little bit in the first half. I think one of the things that, it's obviously hasn't played in a long time, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. One of the things that we'll continue to work on is, he's got this really go through the ball mentality, right? And I think in our league, there's times when you can go through it, but there's also times where you have to delay and force players back inside to where your help is, or force them back. And I think it's just that nuance. I think in the first half he was trying to get a feel for what the speed of the game looks like, what our shape feels like playing in the middle. But I thought he had a really good second half. I thought he grew into the game, made some big plays. But again, young player, new country, new club, hasn't played in 7, 8, 9 months. There's going to be an adjustment phase to it, but I think overall he did a really good job against, again, a really good opponent. And which if it was just any other game, it'd be probably easier to assess. But I think tonight he stepped up again. Gary's a top international striker, right? And for the most part, the back 3 kept them at bay, right? And so as far as the back 3, I think they did a really good job. Again, I don't remember too many clear opportunities that we gave up in front of goal. They did a good job of getting their blocks, marking in the box for the most part. And the one thing that I wanted to see from the back 3 is we want to be brave on the ball. I thought in St. Louis we shied away from the game, and our attack starts in the back. All right, so if the guys up front aren't playing well, probably a good chance that we're not being brave in the back line to find penetrating passes, to not only find penetrating passes, but to also advance, pass and advance forward, move their shape. We were more just static. And so that was a big emphasis tonight, is even Phillip getting around in the first half, second half, Engel getting up. And this is who we are. And we have pivots that are smart and can cover positions. And so the more dynamic we can be in the attack without compromising our defensive structure, the harder it is to defend. And what kind of team do we want to be? We want to be an aggressive team that's brave, that plays with a real level of conviction of winning games and scoring goals. And I saw that from the back 3 tonight.
Pablo, el equipo, tuviste mucha rotación hoy. Yo creo que fue bastante atrevido. Yo pensé que se te iba a caer un poco.
In the team, I think it was a bold decision. I thought that was going to crash and burn, but given that Pablo, among other players, were exceptional areas, maybe one of them missed the mark because they are lacking confidence. Is that a concern to you, especially now that Gozo will be absent?
Yo creo que es una cuestión de confianza.
I think it's a matter of confidence. But today had the big opportunity to showcase his skills.
Pero yo creo que todavía le falta un poco de
But I believe
en un partido.
he is lacking rhythm match-wise. I have Lineker, who is a young man. He also wears the 9, and I can only choose my available players. I cannot bring any other player on board because they are not part of our club. What I want to do is to figure out how I'm going to position those players that I have available, but I feel a little bit bad for Victor because he's not back, but he is pushing himself during the training and he's giving his 100%. And the only thing that is missing is confidence. If Bozo is out, will you ask for a backup? Yes, of course. It's very difficult to have a player like him, and nothing has happened so far. But if he's gone, we need a replacement. We need a top-tier player to continue with the championship. It's impossible to expect Lineker or Sakani be him because they are completely different people, and every player develops differently. Gozo had a different development last year, and in a year and a half time, he kept on going up in terms of level. Maybe he only needed just time, and if we want to remain competitive as part of a league, we need a replacement. And changes with Varea or not having Varea to play in striker. Yes, Jesus, of course. Maybe you need a striker. Yeah, but like I said, nothing has happened. We're still waiting. If things were to stay as they are right now, the idea was to be more offensive in the second leg of the championship because the chances you create are important. And back then, neither I nor anyone knew what was going to happen. Or maybe we can just get Pablo back. Pablo Ruiz. Well, he was the MVP of this match, especially because he hasn't had the opportunity to showcase his skills in many matches. And every week we have a conversation where Pablo comes in to the office and says, will I be given the chance? And I told him, you're training well, but we need to keep on working, and you only need 15 or 20 minutes tops. But Griffin got injured and Pablo came in, but those are the things that I talk about with the players. He wants to play, but not right now. And the opportunity that Pablo took today, it reminds me of Pablo Ruiz of previous time. He was playing offensively, trying to score goals, but also as a team leader, how he was organizing the offensive and the defense. And to me, it was the MVP.
Order for penalty shootouts, was it more player based or was it all coaches?
Well, we obviously trained them yesterday, and the first 5 were really clear. Those guys are, and a big part of that is the level of comfort, and ask all the guys, hey, listen, if you don't feel comfortable, then we can move you back in the order. Everyone stepped up and said, no, this is good. And then we gave the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Again, not expecting to go beyond the 5th kicker. So that's how we did it. Well, one thing I've learned in life is that you can try to control all you want. And I think when you try to control things, you struggle against the greatest forces, which is the universe and all the laws that exist. I think what we do is we go about our work, and I'll say when we came back before the World Cup break, we tied Nashville, we beat Minnesota, and we beat Burnley. It's football. You got to put your head down and keep working, man. There's no guarantees in this game. There's no way to control the results. You can try as hard as you want. You'll be chasing unicorns, man. They don't exist, right? So for us, it's about process. How do we get back to the winning ways? Well, we continue to improve game by game. And every game, it's its own event that'll teach you areas of the game where you're deficient in, right? So LAFC, top, 2.9 XG, did all these things, but we conceded 2 goals against Bouanga and Son. Then we go to Portland, top, first 30 minutes. Then we get a red card. No one ever thought we were going to get a red card. So it's not about we want this, so we're going to get that. That life doesn't give you that. Not even on sports teams. You got to grind, roll up your sleeves, and you got to continue to work. But the one thing that keeps me positive, and the message I'd share with the fans is that we have a great group of guys that are willing to work hard for each other, and I think that's more than half the battle. The other part is finishing our opportunities, and like I said tonight, we could have easily won this game with the chances that we created. Didn't happen. So, we just keep training. We just keep going. And obviously it doesn't feel good for anyone because we want to win, and winning validates the work that we do. But I think life will always give us a ton of lessons to learn along the way. And if you overcome those and you learn from them, then you'll be a stronger team moving forward than you ever were prior to.
We have time for one more question.
Pablo, with Morgan coming back from this red card, he balled out pretty hard tonight. Do you think that sparked a fire under him that's going to maybe spread through the rest of this team?
Yeah, listen, Morgan's been an elite playmaker for us this year. And the other thing he does, and I think why we missed him in St. Louis, is he brings a ton of calm to the game. And so we can talk tactics, we can talk about a lot of different things, but the individual creates a space to receive the ball, to play and link. The other part too is when teams scout a guy like Morgan, there's one guy that they have to worry. They scout a Luna, they scout a Sergi. Now the 3 are almost create this energy amongst themselves. And then you put Gozo in there, and now it becomes a real threat. So it's never about one individual. But the impact I think that Morgan had tonight was his playmaking ability, but also allowing the team to breathe with the ball because he's so secure. He brings guys into the game. He knows when to go forward, but he also knows when, hey, we've been defending for a little bit. And again, that for as much as we train it, that's experience. You got to buy that. And so I think he hasn't played a lot of minutes in the last couple weeks. But I think, and that's why I wanted to push him as long as we could tonight. Started cramping up, but he's going to be a pivotal figure for us moving forward. And I know that when Morgan's in form, not only can he set plays up, but he can score goals as well.
All right, there's RSL head coach Pablo Mastroeni. When we come back, we're talking college football with Josh Furlong. Stay with us. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Josh Furlong covers the Utes for KSLSports.com. He joined us yesterday during the show, talk about the Utes opening day on Monday. Here is Josh with PK and I.
Why is it fall camp, Josh? Isn't it summer camp? I mean, it's August.
I know.
It's always my favorite. It's like we're fall camp, and sometimes it gets into July, and it's like cool. I don't feel it's 104 degrees and it's fall camp, but you know what? We're gonna still go with it.
Don't you see the leaves changing in about 2 months?
Oh yeah, that crisp air, that's blowing in your face.
If they practice at 4 a.m, maybe.
I was relieved. I was so relieved of the early practice because where they have us stand on the field against the concrete wall, it literally becomes 10 or 15 degrees hotter than whatever the day is, and you can cook over there. It was in the shade. It was awesome.
I usually lose. I don't actually practice during fall camp, but I usually lose about 7 pounds.
Yeah, standing around waiting for you to come over and talk. That'll do it. Put you there in the microwave.
Sort of what you would expect out of the first day, all sorts of optimism, and you can go across the country, Josh, and that's basically what you're going to get after day one.
Yeah, the first week-ish, I mean, it's all optimism, right? It's like it's an extension of media days where everybody's happy, everybody's done all the hard work to get there. But you know what? I think to me, I think there is just a little bit of a different vibe. Not that there was a bad vibe with Kyle Whittingham, right? I just think it's different, and I think that's an interesting side of this of where Utah is now trying to live in a new era of Morgan Scalley, right? And there's some energy, some optimism about where they're headed. But you could tell in Morgan's voice that there's still plenty of things that he's stressed about, right? Like there's a lot of things that he wants to see improved and ready. The question he has the questions that we all have. Like he doesn't know yet because they don't have pads on. One of the biggest questions obviously is going to be offensive line, and he can't see that yet because there's no pads and they don't understand how they're really going to gel together when somebody's coming at them at 100 miles an hour. So, I think there's excitement and optimism, but until those pads come on and they start hitting, there's going to be some questions still to be had about this team.
I think that's true, but I think you can draw it out. There's questions until the first game, and given the nature of the first game, there's questions until they play Arkansas. And then depending on how Arkansas looks, there can still be questions into the Big 12.
No, absolutely. I mean, there was, going into that, going into that 2024 season, they looked decent. Everything was going well, and then suddenly it fell apart, and it was really tough. So, you don't really know what you have until you get a few games in. I mean, I remember Kyle talking about it all the time about being, 5 games in until you really understand what you have. And I think, especially with the questions that Utah has this year on the offensive line, you're not really going to know until those week 4, week 5. There are different tests in those first 3 weeks. I mean, you do get an easier opponent and an FCS opponent in Idaho. You do go jump up into the SEC, and then you get Utah State. So you're going to get a wide range of opponents. But I'm curious to see, does that offensive line gel immediately, and do they come out there, looking great against Idaho, or is this one of those games where everybody's excited to be in Rice-Eccles Stadium and you leave kind of disappointed because of the product that was put out there because things didn't work? I think that's really where the test is. But I believe that they feel like they've got what they need to, that they're going to be okay. It's not just going to be a sieve back there and everything's going to come back to Devin Dampier. But, I think that's going to be the biggest question, and then trying to see if these wide receivers really live up to the hype that they've built.
Last December was a month unlike anything that we've experienced in this town, at least since the 3 decades that I've been here. It starts off with Kalani to where assistants thought, we're out of here. We are leaving. We are going to Penn State, and Jay Hill's going to take over. Well, we know what happened there. And then it ends with, well, Jay Hill did leave. and he was the one to leave, and everybody thought that he was going to be the next head coach if Kalani left at BYU, right? And then you have stuff that comes out after the fact, and you were all over it, as far as information and the U of U's Mark Harlan saying he's disappointed it wasn't the smooth transition that was promised. We all remember that. Well, as I look at it, and just being up there, for day one and talking to Morgan down in Texas, you were there, I talked to you down there, that actually the way it played out in terms of Kyle leaving and then taking a lot of assistance might actually be a good thing. And here's where I'm going with this and get your thought on it, is that now all these guys, these newcomers, they are essentially an employee of Morgan Scalley. It's not, I was a coworker of Morgan Scalley's, now he's my boss. You don't have to worry about that. He hired a lot of these coaches, and then he promotes Colton Swan, and then obviously somebody like an Atawaya and Sharif Shaw got different job titles. So in a sense, it allows Morgan, not completely, but certainly probably, I guess go certainly probably, it doesn't make sense. So I'll eliminate the probably. I'll say certainly that it would have been different if Kyle had just retired, because all those coaches wouldn't have left with him, and then Morgan would have had guys that, they wouldn't have the fresh start. Now with all these new dudes up there, he does have a fresh start. So in my mind, that might be more beneficial for the development of Morgan Scalley as a head coach.
And I absolutely agree with that. That's something that I've been saying all along is, after you take a step back and all the frustrations that were had, this is a phenomenal opportunity for Morgan Scalley. One, I truly believe that Kyle would have stepped back and he wouldn't have been influencing Morgan Scalley and what he does, right? Like if he was that advisor or whatever the role was to the athletic director, I truly believe he'd let Morgan be Morgan. But there's always kind of that Nick Saban-esque attitude of like he's hovering around the program. He's going to look, is he approving of what's going on? And that's always there. I think in this version, Morgan gets to be Morgan, right? He gets to hire his own staff. He doesn't have to leave a bunch of the holdovers. And don't get me wrong, a lot of those coaches he wanted. So it's not like, he didn't want him. But I think this is a great opportunity for him to really kind of get as much of a fresh start as he possibly can. It's either going to succeed or it's going to fail with him. And that's the way it should be, right? He shouldn't have somebody looking over his shoulder. Even if it's not really that way, it now allows him to be able to have that opportunity to be able to move forward in his own path. There's nobody standing in the way. Kyle Whittingham's focused on his own stuff. You've got all those other coaches that are focused on their other stuff. And sure, there is some holdover, like you said, Colton Swan, Sharif Shaw, Mark Atawaya, those types of coaches that are there, but you at least have a staff that is Morgan Scalley's staff. He got rid of the strength and conditioning coach and switched it up. There's a lot of different things that allow him to be able to make this his staff. And I think that's a really important thing for him in his first year, because now he doesn't feel like he's just inheriting Kyle Whittingham's, operation. This is Morgan Scalley's operation, and he gets to do it the way that he wants to, which is, I think, very important.
You two I got like 10 things I want to ask you right now, Josh. So I just gotta pick one. Let's start with one thing that did not work well under Kyle. Almost everything did. Kyle had a great run, but it was not a perfect run. And if there's one thing I always look at and always underperformed, and PK got sick of me saying it, wide receivers. They're not good enough. They should be better. And at one point when we were talking, I'm like, why don't they at least go out as the transfers became popular and get the best guys out of the Mountain West? Mountain West football is actually pretty good. They send people to the NFL. When he needed a coordinator and he went to New Mexico, and he needed a quarterback and he went to New Mexico, paid off, jackpot. Mountain West football is pretty good. So now you got Morgan coming in, and there's some areas where there's no way he's going to match what Kyle does. But to me, there's also areas where he can surpass what Kyle does. And the number one thing I would say is the wide receiver group. It's got to be better. It's just, I don't even think it's been C- most years in the Pac-12 era. If you go all the way back to the Sugar Bowl, it was pretty good. But you got to go back a long way. Do you think with some of these Mountain West transfers that the wide receivers are actually going to be an asset to the offense as opposed to the group where you look at them and think, I hope they block for some downfield runs and don't mess it up?
No, I completely agree. And I think that was one of the biggest knocks, right? It's not like Kyle Whittingham didn't try to get high-end talent, but I think with so many years of experience of just saying, look, I'm going to run the ball down your throat, essentially, right? Obviously he threw the ball, but because of that, I think it limited a lot of their potential. Yes, they had star tight ends, and that was a phenomenal opportunity. That was kind of the weird subtangent of that where wide receiver was not solid most of the time, but what tight end, they found a gold mine there, right? Yeah. So there was successes, but for whatever reason, he could not get wide receivers. And so I think this year, I think there's at least an attempt to, in the sense that it's not like Utah's just going to say, okay, we're going to throw it all the time, right? There's no, Kyle would always talk about, I want balance. I want a 50-50 balance of passing and throwing. And everybody kind of nod their head sure, okay. But I think what Morgan is trying to do is he wants to spread the ball around to as many people as possible. So it may still have a lot of run elements, especially if that offensive line can hold up. but there's going to be a lot of attempts to be able to start passing. And I think with Kevin McGiven, there's more of an emphasis to start passing because he understands that relaxes a little bit of the run game. And so I think there's going to be a nice little balance there. Obviously, it has to work out with these guys. They have to catch the ball. They have to be in sync with Devin Dampier. They've got to be able to do the right things. But I don't think you're going to get an emphasis on, okay, wide receivers, you're here to block. Every wide receiver knows that they have to block. I'm teaching my 12-year-old that when he's lined up as a wide receiver, he has to block as well. But I think there's a different attitude here where they want to throw the ball. They want to mix it up. Morgan wants to be more aggressive that way and not just maintain the status quo. You know, he's younger, so he understands kind of the evolution of this game a little bit and understanding kind of how that's gone. But I think he wants his new wrinkles to it as well, where it's just we want to spread the ball around and not just create this hot hand. I mean, if the hot hand works, it's great, but not just this one hand where you're just going to dump it off to, Ryan Davis last year. All it is, you're going to get a 5-yard out route or a 5-yard, whatever, dig route, whatever. You're going to get something that is going to be, dynamic. It's going to have a lot of variations, and it's going to allow them to be able to spread the field. So once again, proof is in the pudding, right? We got to see it, but I think there's at least going to be much more of an effort there. You're going to see Morgan Scalley trying to push at the effort a little bit more to try to spread that ball around and at least make everybody an asset of the game, including the running backs who he wants to make part of that receiving game as well.
Tell us about the story that you did. He gave you access. I assume you asked him, and he said yes. And then, or at least somebody asked him. You maybe asked the sports information people, and they relayed it to him. I've read the story. Get inside because you're there sitting in their meetings in his office and whatnot. Just give us a highlight of that.
Yeah, honestly, it was a really cool opportunity. I mean, it's such a rare opportunity for many coaches to do it. Obviously, Kyle kept things pretty close to the vest. It's not that Morgan doesn't either, but I think especially in this first year, it was an opportunity to kind of showcase how he operates, right? And then, like, at the end of the day, many people are going to look at this and it's still an in-house office job, right? You come in there, you go to several meetings, you're doing a lot of stuff. So like that side of it, many people are going to find as boring, but there's a lot of the little nuances how you saw Morgan kind of operate, right? He's very much into wanting to create a culture, and it's not that him just saying it, right? Like he very much so is trying to build that culture within that program and trying to live it and try to hold people accountable to it. But it was cool to kind of see the operation of how he was able to enforce that and trying to get the guys to kind of buy in. And there's a lot of positivity and excitement about that, right? Even in staff meetings, there's a lot of buy-in and excitement towards the directions that Morgan wants. Now, look, it's not like everybody's standing up and clapping after everything Morgan says, right? Like we get that. It's a meeting. But like, I think it's kind of the direction that he's taking things, right? It's he wants to build a personal touch where, the third string, running back feels the same as the starting running back or the quarterback, right? There's a personal connection with Morgan Scalley himself. It's not just the coaching staff, it's himself. He wants to be able to make himself accessible. He wants to be able to make his coaches accessible while also kind of preaching this opportunity of saying, hey, like if you feel like there's ways to do Utah better, let's talk. You have to have evidence of it. You've got to be able to support that evidence. But I think there's a lot of that. He wants to support these athletes every possible way that he can. And that was definitely shown in all the meetings that he took part in. There's a lot of, recruiting meetings. There's different meetings to help him become a better head coach, right? And different people on staff presenting him ideas. So, it's hard to wrap all that day into one, but I think that's the overarching theme is he wants to create a personal touch in a business that's very transactional. And I think that's a hard balance to make, but you're seeing that. The fact that he showed up to the airport to pick up Devin Dampier after his surgery is that little touch that kind of goes to show who Morgan Scalley is. Yes, Devin Dampier is a star quarterback, and obviously you're going to take care of that guy. But the fact that you can go out of your way to do these things, that's the little things that these players are talking about. That's kind of, the player's coach is what a lot of people will say. That's how Morgan is approaching it. And I think that's just the little subtle differences that Kyle operated in.
Josh Furlong covering the Utes for KSL Sports. I want to flip one of my earlier comments here because I think this is so important for Morgan. And the farther he can kick the can down the road, the better, obviously. But one of Kyle's great strengths was when things got wrong, they often got fixed
quickly. And after losses, there were bounce backs. Now, we can all point to, multiple quarterback injuries and a 7-game losing streak a couple years ago. Sure, there are examples where things didn't get fixed. But those Rose Bowl teams both lost 4 times. And one of them was the Rose Bowl, so you don't bounce back. That's the end of the year. But to have 3 losses along the way and still find a way to get to the conference title game and win it and get to the Rose Bowl, Kyle's teams were always resilient. And you can say it quickly and it sounds easy. I've rooted for a lot of San Diego teams that had 0 resilience. So I'm really curious, where does that come from? Do Morgan teams have that quality? You don't really want to find out because you want the team to go 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, 7-0. What do you think, and what signs have you seen that maybe give you a hint, or maybe you don't know and you're just waiting to see for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't ultimately know, right? Especially as the head coach. But I think there's many elements of him as a defensive coordinator that showcase that. And one of the most important, I would say, is probably that 2024 season. That defense could have locked it up and said, you know what, we're done. We're tired of trying to win games for you guys. You can't even go score 10 points. You can't score 14 points. We're doing everything we can to help you. There's so many games that way where Utah literally scored 2 touchdowns and they win those games, and Utah couldn't do it. That defense, talking to Morgan, he said that season was probably one of his favorite seasons as a defensive coordinator, just to watch those defenders, because they never gave up. From the first game to the last game, they continued to give their all to that team. And I think, to me, that culture of the RSNB, right? Like, you're going to hear that a ton with him, and you heard it a ton on the defensive side. And he's adopting that a little bit to the offensive side of the ball, and kind of that mindset that, like, you just are always resilient. You're moving, you're doing all these things to help. That's got to translate to the offensive side of the ball. But I think if there's any elements there was the 24 season, some other seasons where that defense, they continued, right? They continued to fight for each other, and they continued to do what they needed to the very end. I mean, there were several games Morgan talked about the offense not living it up and the defense just continually fighting. I think that is the mindset and the approach that Morgan Scalley takes to this team, right? At the end of the day, you have to see it. You have to believe it. There's got to be a connection with this team. The offensive side was clearly fractured. They didn't have a lot of great success. And I don't know that they were incredibly resilient on that side, but the defensive side was. And I think that's that culture that he's bringing into it, of saying, look, you fight to the bitter end, even if things aren't going well for you. He builds that connection. There's a lot of camaraderie there. And as long as that can translate to the entirety of the team, and that team is connected, which I think this team is, there can be a lot of resilience there. There can be a lot of that fighting through it, even if this season isn't the dream season that everybody expects, where, hey, Utah's a playoff team and Morgan Scalley's first season. I think there's going to be some fight there. But until we see it on the field, I mean, it's really hard to know. But I do believe that Morgan is building something like that. And that's probably the most recent example of something of that caliber.
Josh, thanks for a few minutes. We appreciate it. We'll see you up on the hill covering the Utes all year long. And people can follow you at KSL Sports and on social media for all the latest from the U. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
There's Josh Furlong. What is trending? The headlines are next.